thank you for being here, everybody. I know it's afternoon of Friday. You probably are thinking why I'm not in the beach or swimming in the sea at this moment. I appreciate that. So there's quite a few people I never seen in the room here. So my name is Gaetano. I'm that guy. It's my birthday today. Important thing. So if you want to bring me presents, I already got one candy here. If you're not, it's no problem. You just will stay here forever. You're not allowed to leave the room anyway. So what is this workshop about? Is all about automation. So why automate? It's like, if you have to ask me this question, I will not even answer. Do you all agree that automating is good? Who does not agree? Okay, fair enough. I'm not opinionated. You know, when I ask questions, I really give you the choice. There's not a clear good and a clear but answer. There's two assistants here in the room, sitting there in the corner. They're supposed to come around and help everybody with the practical works. If you fall asleep, they should kick you out of the chair so we can keep everybody awake during the time. Please, 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 I want this to be interactive, so ask anything, even if you think it's stupid or whatever. I really like questions. So the first question is, there's a lot of Docker, and there's quite a fair amount of easy publish in the talk. So first question is, how much Docker do you know? Who has never used Docker before? Okay, who has used a lot of Docker? Okay, so easy publish? Easy publish new guys, or easy publish new? Raise your hand. 2, 3, 4. Easy publish experienced? Everybody else. Okay, so if you find things a little bit hard, those two guys at the bottom, make good use of them. Different topics. The idea is, for this workshop, is talking about all the things which is not about developing code. So it's not about making controllers, it's not about your twig templates, it's not about integrating with an LDAP server, anything you want to do with the CMS. It's just, oh, now I know I can use this very nice tool. It's CMS, it's based on Symfony. And I deployed a small website for a customer, but now I have to update it. And you know, updating things by hand, it's a pain. Last time I did it, I rolled out, I broke the database. And my colleague did some changes to the content classes, which I did not have on my machine. All these kind of things. So it's bringing a bit of like enterprise into your development practice. You could call it DevOps, you know, but DevOps was trendy like 3 weeks ago, so it's not really DevOps anymore. First part of the talk is introduction level Docker. So it's a lot of concepts, not hitting the keyboard. So if you hear this, it's just everybody falls asleep during the first half hour. So who wants to see the introduction to Docker topics? And who wants to start with 1, 2? Okay, fair enough. I think we will have to do it. Other people, you can sleep for 15 minutes, no more. So what is Docker? It's a very complicated thing, but you have to, you know, simple concepts are good. It's like a virtual machine, but it's lighter. If you think about this, it's like, well, I can understand this pretty easily. So this is taken straight from the Docker website, is already a bit more detailed view, you know. How a virtual machine works is put a complete guest operating system on top of your operating system. Docker does not put a real operating system. It just puts a couple of processes and files on top of your existing operating system. And it runs those processes in using features of Linux, which are namespaces and control groups and things like this. So your processes think they are in a virtual machine, even if they are not. So when you start, it really feels like a virtual machine. When you start hitting corner cases and bugs, and you say, this is not a virtual machine, fuck, everything is broken. But let's say that luckily you have some guy who spent 2 years fixing all the bugs, and that's why you're here, so I can give you my experience. You don't have to replicate all this learning curve. How do you start with Docker? So if you never run Docker before in your life, you can open a command line. For example, let me just not take the whole screen. I got great resolution, amazing. So Docker run -ti Ubuntu 15.10 bash. Wow, magic. I changed my prompt. What's going on here? You know? Yes, what's going on?
Bash execute in the container and you see.
Exactly. I started a container and I'm running bash inside the container. That's why I see a new command prompt. The Docker command, docker run, runs a container. Ubuntu 15.10 is the name of the image. It comes from a repository from the internet. So Docker has built-in knowledge of a repository which is called Docker Hub, where all public containers are. And the last piece of the command line is bash. So bash is the process I run inside my container. It's interactive, so I can work inside the container. If I just say exit, well, container is there no more. So this is what happened. Docker downloaded something from the internet. Actually, I'm cheating. It didn't download it now. It didn't download it yesterday. And it's cached locally for you. So that's why it's super fast the second time. First time, maybe it takes 15 minutes. Run the bash script, and when the bash shell, sorry, and when the bash shell terminates, the container stops. So that's one of the important things in Docker is you always run one process in Docker as your root process. Is like the process number 1 in Linux in a standard operating system. And when that process terminates, the whole container stops. It's super easy if you want to run it like this, like, oh, I have a shell script or I have a small application. I need to test it. Does it work in Ubuntu? Does it work in another environment? Or I want to completely configure the environment. I don't want to touch my host computer. Super easy to use it this way. If your application also is a single process, like all-time Windows applications, one exe, you could put it in a Docker container quite easily and use it as a way to distribute it. I could run phpMyAdmin just like with the same command line, except instead of bash, I run php as web server, and then I connect to the container via port 80 and have a phpMyAdmin instance. It's super easy, but for continuous integration, it's not so easy because generally, when you want to do continuous integration, you need to start thinking about network ports, multiple things, a lot of configuration. So Docker by itself does not do all of the things you need. There's a huge amount of tools. Like every week, there's a new tool. Then the tool from 2 weeks ago maybe dies or maybe changed name. So you have to keep up a lot with all the blogs, and you hire one guy just for reading Docker blogs and tell you, every now and then how things are going. But it's improving a lot. So you have Docker already installed in the virtual machine, and it's the latest version, which is good. It's got much better networking than the previous version, and it makes it much more easy to run a continuous integration. Words, important words. So the container is like the virtual machine, the running thing. The image is the disk's files, which you start from. The Docker file is also another word you hear a lot. What is Docker file? Is basically a file with a description of all the steps to build an image. Because I started running a vanilla Ubuntu, but generally I want to build my own image. So how you build an image? There's different ways, but 90% of the time what you will do is you create a Docker file, and in Docker file you just start from an existing image and you add the instructions to change it and customize your image. And then you can run your image, and after you build it once, you can run it many times. So keep in mind there's two separate processes, building an image and running an image. Another interesting thing is the volume. The volume is a way that is a name that Docker uses to say, I want to have some files which are on my host computer, but I make them available to Docker without copying them. So it's like a network mount from the host into Docker. If you think it's quite easy. And it's basically a very simple and also a very good way to share data between your host computer and your Docker image. So you're not copying data all the time. You just keep it on the host, edit it, and it's available. So this is basically all the things we will need to know. There's a lot of Docker philosophy. You can read hundreds of blog posts every week. The basic idea is one process per container. You can run many processes, but everybody says it's a bad idea. So if you want to run easy publish, generally you need at least one web server, one database server. It's already 2 processes. Then probably you want to have a Solr for indexation, 3, Memcache 4, Varnish 5, Nginx in front of Varnish 6. So you will not be running a single Docker container. You will be running a stack of containers. And then you will need to figure out how to best make them work together. Oh, immutable as well. What does containers being immutable mean is that you should not put your data into your containers. You should keep your data away, and then the containers should be able to run, stop, It's like on the cloud. You can scale. Keep data in one place, fire up 99 containers. I think basically everybody in the Docker community agrees on this. Comments. How do you see all the images you have? Because I said they are cached, remember? So they stay on disk, and they eat your disk like for breakfast. You start using Docker. Next day, you go out buy 1 terabyte SSD, or try to convince your boss. This is what I did. You're going to have a long list of containers and images everywhere, and Docker never deletes them, which is really pain in the ass. So every now and then, you have to list them, try to figure out which one you don't need anymore, which one are not used for the last 6 months, or just remove everything and rebuild from scratch the one you used. PS, show all the running container. PS-A is all containers, so even the stopped ones. And RM and RMI is for cleaning up stuff a little bit. So let's try one of those commands. Docker PS, nothing. -A. I can see a lot of containers. Of course, I've been developing and playing around for doing the workshop for many days. So far, everything is nice. There's a little things that you need to learn when you start using Docker. Is one thing, how do I share this data if the container is immutable? Shall I use volumes? Shall I use other technologies? How do I make my application accessible outside of Docker? Do I expose port 80? How can I really talk to it? If I have to use many containers, how do I actually start them together? How do I tell Solr what is the IP address of Easy Publish or vice versa and everything? And one of the little things which I think is very important is where are my log files? Because good developers always check their log files. And if the log files are all away in Docker, so you don't see them anymore, you think everything is fine because you don't see them, But that's where a lot of the valuable information when you debug really is. And then you start getting into more complicated topics. Like, it's not a real virtual machine. You need to have a specific user ID inside Docker, and it does not get the user ID from your files on the file system. So you start to, if you have 50 developers in your company, and everybody has a different laptop because you say you can run Ubuntu or Clear Linux or whatever, maybe one is going to be user ID 1000, one is going to be user ID 1099, and then your Docker image will have problems being available for everybody. Security updates, it's like, you remember how easy it was in Debian, apt-get update? Well, forget it. It's like, there's no support for updates in Docker. It's a huge pain. So there's a blog post address there for things we learned while playing around with Docker. Some of the things are not valid anymore because the thing advances so fast. But I think you can still find some valuable information. So last thing is Docker Compose. What is Docker Compose? Is one more tool, which is made from the same people who make Docker. And it's a file and a command line tool to parse it. And in this file, you put the description of multiple containers at the same time. So that's not the only way to create huge stacks of containers, but it's a very simple way. So if you want to start and run 3 containers at the same time, most likely what you will do is create a Docker Compose file, put there the description of where your Docker file are that describe every single image, and run Docker Compose run, and the thing starts. No questions? OK, so 15 minutes. Docker stack for easy publish. The Docker stack for easy publish is already installed on your computer since everybody but one have run the provisioning script. It's built on Docker Compose. Why would you use Docker for easy publish development? So does anybody here use Docker for easy publish development? 3 guys, 4. OK, I think there's many reasons. The main reason is that it's a complicated application. So you have all these pieces. You have the database, you have the web server, you have the reverse proxy, you have Memcache, you have the Solr. So if you're good at DevOps, maybe you can bring all these pieces up together. But if you have like 10 colleagues, and they're not very good at this, and how do you make sure each one of the developer runs the same stack, or knows how to configure it? Maybe somebody changed one line in the Nginx configuration, it cannot work anymore. So it calls you, so you stop working and then you spend 3 hours to fix the problem. So generally, what people would do is probably share virtual machines across all the developers. But sharing virtual machine has the problem that the full VM is pretty big. So every time it's like 20 gigs. So you're on a local LAN, maybe you can share virtual machine easily. If your team is 1 guy in Portugal, 1 in Poland, 1 somewhere else, then, today I changed 1 line in the virtual machine. Let me sync again my 20 gigs. OK, I go take coffee and come back tomorrow. Docker is a bit better, because what you share is just the configuration files. Then you have to rebuild your images, which can take time. But at least what you put in the repository is just the configuration file. So it's a few hundred kilobytes. It's not 20 gigs anymore of data, which go around. So that's, I think, a good reason. The other reason is, depending on the type of customers you have, sometimes you start developing, and you develop on Ubuntu or Debian or Red Hat, whatever you just prefer platform, and then the customers say, now I found a sysadmin company which is separate, and this sysadmin company dictates the rule. I think this is just crazy, but a lot of sysadmins do it. I would just shoot them. But they say, no, we only deploy on Mageia. Crazy sysadmins. So maybe your scripts work, maybe some things break. So a good way to test is actually put your development environment on exactly the same environment that it runs on production. So if you have some crazy developer starts writing with very complicated shell scripts, is it there or not? So having your development environment as close as possible to the production environment is a very good thing. There's no more developers saying, it works on my machine. If it works on your machine, it works on production. If it does not work in production, and you say it works on my machine, you're lying. You can fire all developers like this. After 1 week, nobody there. Also, maybe not so important, but still interesting, is the fact that you're separating your application. Because if you deploy for a small website, maybe you have a single computer where you deploy. But if you have a bigger customer, maybe you have separated everything. And sometimes when you develop, you don't think about this. So you all access the same file because it's there. But when you're deploying, the file is not there because it's on the web server. It's not on the Solr server anymore. And you find out you forgot to have a script to copy it over or something like this. So it helps you catch these small errors where you make assumptions that all the things are together, all the things share the same IP, all the things share the same port just because they're running on one VM or on one computer, and you split them. And then, again, it's just being closer to production. So, very dry. What is in the Docker stack? which is proposed here at the workshop. There's the web server, which is Apache, because it's the one which is still officially supported by Easy Publish, not the others. MySQL, web server, memcached, Solr, a dedicated container for the command line. So this is already first interesting point. We are not running anything on the command line on the web server, which again is close to production. Normally when you have a big Easy Publish installation, you would have one server dedicated to running cron jobs, because when you run cron jobs, they eat a lot of CPU and they eat a lot of memory, and your web server becomes slow if you run it on the web server, even if they're at night. So if your website has to be up 24/7, generally what you do is put another web server, separate server, and you run the cron jobs on the separate server. So here we create a Docker container for just running everything on the command line. One for Varnish and one for Nginx. So Nginx has the role of the load balancer in front of Varnish, and also terminating HTTPS, just like in real life. Do you all know what all these bits are? Yes? And since this stack is for developers, it should be close to production, but we also want to make developers very productive. There's bonus things in there. There's a PHP-MyAdmin, so they can do things in the database, not just by MySQL command line. A MailDev, which is just a very nice small tool which has an SMTP web interface. And there's a bit of control panels, so you can check what is the status of all this Docker stack. Are things going okay, or are they going wrong? And this is how it looks. I think maybe this is a better way to look at it. So I put on the top all the pieces which made the application, the standard web database, memcache, Solr, and the command line container. And then there's Varnish and Nginx. And then separate containers, one which is the main control panel container. So it just runs a separate web server for one page, basically. And the other one, the one with PHP and MyAdmin and SMTP server. You can see that there's small numbers on the vertical lines, and these are the ports. Because one of the problems you have when you start running 99 containers inside your computer is if you want to access them, they use up a port. But what if you're running MySQL on your computer or Apache, You're going to start having a lot of port conflicts. So one of the things in this Docker stack we try to do is try to limit the amount of ports, so we are not conflicting too much with the ports of the services on the host computer. What you can see is we use port 80 is for accessing the website, because it's just easier for everybody to type the URL without every time typing, semicolon 99 or something. And 88 for the control panel, just because we need another port, so even if you use multiple host names, it's completely separate. And then we have 443 if you want to access your website on HTTPS. And two more is 8080 and 8081 is for trying freaky combination where you go to the website by going through Varnish but without HTTPS, or through Nginx and through Nginx and Varnish without HTTPS, or no Nginx and only Varnish. Those ports are really there for troubleshooting problems with Varnish and Nginx configuration, not for Easy Publish. So most of the work we will do, we will be doing using port 80 for the website, and maybe take a look at what is in the control panel on port 88. Okay, just a couple more slides before we start hitting the keyboard. The principle for developing this stack. One thing we learned is that it's good to have the configuration of the services on the host. So the configuration of Apache, MySQL, and everything is mounted via volume. What is the benefit of this is that if you find out you need to change the Apache configuration, you don't need to build the Docker container anymore. You just modify the file. You can edit from the host, so you're not You don't have to have a container running an editor like VI or anything. Just edit the file and run the service restart command within the Docker container. So it makes it really easy to change your services. That's one good thing. Source code as well is on the host computer. So even if your Docker stack is completely stopped, you can still edit your source code. This is a good thing. The log files, again, they are a separate volume. So all the log files you can see from the host computer, not only from within the container. You do not need to run Docker commands to see what's going on in the logs. Another thing we found out is how do you deal with SSH keys? Because if you want to do checkouts from Git, you will do the checkouts from within the container. And if you want to commit to Git, it will be the same. So it's a bit complicated. And the best practice is you don't have to put your SSH keys into the container. Because then developers put everybody else key in the container, and basically your whole company security is gone. So we use SSH agent. You know how SSH agent works. Basically, you put your key in your agent in a host computer, and then it goes through the container. You can have long chains of things. Another important thing is when you have a team of developers working on a project, most of the project should be configured the same for everybody, but the developer should be allowed to tweak some things. For example, the user ID. If the user ID on their host computer is different, because reasons, there should be a configuration file which is not in Git. So every developer can change it for his own installation where the user ID is. So we have two configuration files for the Docker stack. When one configuration file is in Git, the other one is not in Git, and that's where you can put your GitHub credentials or anything which you're doing for local testing. Last thing is that we tried to make this Docker stack useful for Easy Publish, but not only for Easy Publish. So I use it for Drupal projects as well. Drupal, maybe you don't need all these bits and pieces, but it just works quite beautifully the same. Last point, again, it tries to be as close as possible to production setup. So compared to some other Docker stacks, you will find that there. One of the differences you might notice is that our images use service start and service stop to start the services, instead of having custom init scripts to starting the processes within each container. OK, so enough talking, I think. If we look at, there's a doc exercises folder. And we can see, well, let me open that thing in PHP Storm. Oops. Exercise 1. OK, so exercise 1 says, what is the goal is getting acquainted with the Docker stack and learning how to deploy a copy of the stack. So let's imagine that we already have the whole stack, and this is used for developers. So we call it the dev environment. Next, what we would do is, before we go live, we want to have a testing environment where we have our manual testers test the application. How do we deploy this new copy of the environment? How do we set it up? We create a new copy of the stack, and we will call this UAT. You can call it staging, whatever you like, but all the exercises call it UAT. So the idea is that we will create a complete copy of the stack. I hope you have enough disk space. It's not 15 gigs. It's only a few hundred megs. Make a copy and customize it. So first step is make sure you have the very latest version and that you have provisioned. So if you stop the provisioning with suspend, the next command is resume. If you started from a pen drive, you should run stack php build and stack php run. And if you never run it, you can run this again, but it's going to take half an hour. So what I will do here, git status. Okay, I'm a master, and I'm up to date. Git pull just in case. Already up to date. Okay, so the next command is php stack.php build. You can see it's pretty quickly. It's just because this thing has been built already, so it does nothing. So php stack.php build. What happens when I run this command? Basically, it calls docker compose. But it adds a little bit on top. So we develop a PHP script instead of a shell command, which is like a wrapper around docker compose. It's a very light wrapper because a lot of the things which were originally in the PHP script, they have been put into docker compose because it advances fast, so we remove it. So now it's very, very simple wrapper. One of the things you might notice is basically it tells you the command which is executing. So basically, the only thing that it's doing at the moment is setting an environment variable and then calling docker compose build. So for this stack, the environment variable called compose project name is quite important because it's the name of the stack. And when you run the containers, they will be called easy-deploy underscore something. So let's say you're a developer and you work on 3 projects at the same time. You can use the same stack 3 times on your computer. Just give them different name using this environment variable. Of course, if you use the default configuration, you cannot run them at the same time because the ports will conflict. But you could have 3 different projects and you just start one and stop the other day in and day out. It takes 5 seconds. Other commands, stack php, ps. It shows you if any process for Docker only within this stack is running. It says nothing. So at the moment, my stack is stopped. Stack php run. There you go. Interesting thing when you run the run command is you get a lot of information out. On the first, now let me try to do it maybe wider so it's more readable. On the first column is the name of your container. That's the name you will use to connect to it. On the second column is the command that we run. So for every image, basically, we always create a script called bootstrap.sh. Third column is up. If any of the containers say not up, you probably better stop the stack and fix it and restart because your application will not be in working state. And last one is a bit hard to read, but it's the ports mapping. So this is like the local port 80 within the container is mapped on port 8081 on the host. So you can see all the ports mapping. Okay, so I didn't yet create a copy of my stack, but I wanted just to show you what is inside the stack. So let's fire up a web browser. First thing first, there's the control panel, the thing I was saying. Nice things within here. Here you get a lot of information about the running containers themselves from within one container. This is like Inception thing. Mail dev, SMTP. There's not a single mail which has been sent yet into this thing. Memcache. This is PHP Memcache Admin. It's basically that project, but I don't know any. There's probably one or two which are a bit more fresh. It gives you statistics about Memcache. It's like, do you need more memory into your Memcache? Is there too many evictions going on? At the moment, of course, there's nothing in here. PHP MyAdmin. I don't even remember the password at the moment, so I will just show you the login form. Solar. Solar is pretty good because you always need to do some Solar debugging and troubleshooting while developing. Important things, how many cores we have. 1 core, 80 objects. Okay, so there's already something in my Solar. Whoops. And Varnish. Varnish control panel. Anybody comfortable with this Varnish control panel? You can see the whole VCL configuration, which is good if you're not sure when you're running Varnish which configuration you're running. Sometimes you start it and you use another configuration from the one you expect. And the second best thing is you want to, oh, no, wrong link. You want to clear your Varnish cache, you just say ban every single URL. So if you've been navigating the whole development website via Varnish and everything is cached in Varnish, and then you change your code and you need to clear Varnish, 1, 2, 3, ban, done. Of course, you can do it on the command line most likely, but it's just nice to have it as well. And Apache server status, Apache server information, maybe PHP information is a bit more useful if you ever find yourself that you don't know what you have in PHP ini. And this is also useful, I think. A lot of the developers forget about this. You know what this is? It's the configuration of OP cache, which is the successor of APC. So it's the thing which caches the PHP scripts in memory and make them fast. So you always want to have this enabled. But it's also important that it has enough memory, you know, because if you start trashing these things, then your requests per second will most likely go down, and at some point you might even have weird bugs going on your website. And then, of course, there is the website itself with the admin interface. There you go. And the website without the admin interface. Does everybody has the stack up and running, working? Some errors. Okay. Okay, so one problem which many people had is that port 80 is actually occupied by Apache. I apparently made a mistake in the scripts to disable Apache on the host. So the command is sudo service apache 2 stop. If you got an error message that, you know, port 80 is occupied, this is the command. And then you start again stack PHP run. No, it's this one.
Okay.
I had a problem last workshop. I didn't understand why this was. That explains a lot.
Okay, so should be up and running for everybody now. Yeah, probably a bit better. Okay, so now the stack is up and running and it works, at least as far as going to the homepage works. But the next step is create a copy of the stack. So of course it's better if you stop it before you copy it over. Stack PHP stop. Now I have a fast SSD. This might be a bit slower depending on your computer. It still takes a while, even for me. Done. I go into the new stack, and now this should be a UAT environment. So in real life, it would be on a separate computer. But now I'm running it on the same computer, and some exercise we will go back to the development stack. So I will change a bit of configuration, give it a different name. So there's no confusion between the two stacks. Okay. Oops. No, I didn't copy the command fully, I guess. Okay, so far what I did is I only modified two files. One is docker-compose.env.local. Okay, and the other one is docker-compose.conf.sh. So the first one, docker-compose.env.local, is the file I already mentioned, is the one which is not in Git. This is also good because if you have a complete copy of the Docker stack on a UAT machine, and it's exactly the same from Git than on your dev machine, there has to be one file which says, hey, I'm UAT, I'm dev, and that's the file which you would use for this purpose. And Docker Compose conf.sh is the file where you put the name of the stack. So I just changed the name of the stack so that my new containers will not have the same name. So I only modified two files. Let's try to see what happens. Here I'm at the root of the new copy, php stat.php ps. Says there's nothing running, run. And you can see that it's super fast. Not working?
When I tried PS, then it showed a lot of process to proceed, exit, but I don't know why.
Because you didn't change the sh file.
Yeah?
So you see compose project name is still easy deploy. So when you run this, it gives you the status of the dev stack.
No, just see.
There were three.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, so question, who guesses what happens if I reload the page? Nothing. What does nothing mean? Nothing will change. Reasonable guess. Let me say Control F5, so I'm sure exactly the same. So it's now I have separate installation of Easy Publish. It was quite quick, is it? I don't know how you deploy, but the company I work for, this was like, oh wow, magic. Reload this page as well. Oh, in case you're wondering, for admin is admin publish, well-known password historical from Easy Systems. Okay. So what we did is we started our UAT environment. So the first question is what I will see is exactly the same. Second question is which Symfony environment is it running on?
Currently?
Yeah, the current one which we copied over. Which Symfony environment is it using? UAT? Or dev. Who says dev? Who says UAT? Oh, it's a bit. Where is it? I don't remember. Dev. Yeah, basically we didn't tell anywhere that it was a new environment which should not be called dev in terms of Symfony environments. We just created a copy from the point of view of Docker. So where in the stack we tell which EasyPublish environment to use. If you have done any EasyPublish installation, you probably know that you can find it inside. Oh, by the way, I didn't explain a lot about the top level directories here. Let me make a short introduction here. Config is the configuration for all the Docker containers. So configuration for CLI, MySQL. Why is MySQL here? Probably left over. Docs is the documentation with the exercises. Images is where all the Docker files are and the bootstrap.sh. Installation is the scripts for the workshop. And site is where EasyPublish is. So the whole installation of EasyPublish is here. For the purpose of the workshop, everything is one Git repository. The way we would work in real life is that we do a separate Git clone into the site directory or use a Git submodule, whatever you prefer, so you can keep your Docker stack and your project separate. Maybe when you start playing around, you think putting everything in a single repository is a good idea. After a while, you realize not. Question? Okay. So where does EasyPublish tell which environment to use? Is here. It's getenv environment. Can you find it out in the current stack? Which file is set in the environment? Or where would you put the environment in your projects? htaccess. Good candidate. Let's check out the htaccess. Now, where's... vhost, also good choice. So it's probably either vhost or htaccess, depending on your preference or what the sysadmin said at the hosting company. But where is my htaccess? Because it's probably not... Wait, what's wrong with my mouse? It's probably not here in the web folder. But maybe the container has a different idea of where the htaccess file is. Because what I'm seeing here, well, first of all, I didn't change, so I'm still in the old folder. You should probably close this and open PHP Storm in the QA thing. But the second thing is the web server is running a container, and I can mount different files to the containers. So maybe I can see inside the containers files that I do not see here, and vice versa. So it might be a little bit tricky to remember this when I begin. But let's close this thing, and let's open PHP Storm pointing to the new directory, deploy QA. So I start looking. Now it's going to take like 15 minutes before it indexes everything again. OK, so it's the new project. OK. So if I want to check for real if the htaccess is there, probably the best option is to log in into the web container. Docker exec -ti easy. You can use tab for completing the name, which is kind of good, /web. And then I can run bash. Here, now I'm connected into the root container. So 2 tips, you can use bash here. And when you're connected to the container, remember, you can always see it because the command prompt is different. So, because you will sometimes execute commands in the container which were for the host and vice versa. This is blue. So I'm in var www site. So this is the root of the website, which is the site directory on the host file system. Will I find htaccess here in the web? Yes. And var set mvif request method star environment equals dev. Our first contestant on the left. It was htaccess. Let's modify. Do I have vi here? No. Okay. I have to edit it from outside the container. Now, I could also install vi inside the container if I need it, I'm root. When you run bash, by default, you're root. apt get install vi. But there's no cache of apt. So I first need to refresh my apt cache, which takes about 5 minutes. The question is, why did we not install vi inside the web container? Is because to keep the container small. Also, if you get crazy enough that you want to run this thing in production, using Docker can give you some good security thing, because you can remove from the containers everything except the one thing which runs. So I would have vi installed on the CLI container, because this is more or less where most of my development happens. But on the web container and all the other containers, there's no vi, no nano, no pico. Cannot edit a file. Maybe there's ed, because you cannot remove ed from Linux. But okay, vim. Try again. htaccess. UAT. Ooh. File var dub site is publish config uat.yaml does not exist. Makes sense. Now I'm creating a new Symfony environment. I actually need to provide some configuration for it. But at least htaccess is being used. So next step is go back here. I'm going to be lazy and do some copy pasta. Up. What is the path? It's from within config. Okay, I'm just then. Oop. Where am I? Four files, make some changes. Last one, probably I missed a couple of characters. Okay, it says that it should be fine. Back to the website. Reload. It takes a while, it's a good sign. Build in all varnish caches and easy publish caches. Something not perfect here. Okay, so it seems that some things are right, some things not so much. Yes, we probably didn't generate the assets. If depending on the set commands I ran, it probably put in UAT configuration the fact that the assets do not go through the controller anymore. So I might try to regenerate the assets. But I'm not going to do this inside the web container because I said I only run command line stuff in the CLI container. So this time I log in into the CLI. Important thing as well is I did something wrong before here when I copied, is about file system permissions. Our stack assumes that all the files are owned by the user call site, but I copied them as root. So the correct command is always connect to the CLI and run su site instead of bash. So that's the command I should run every single time. When I connect to the CLI container, I get asked for a username and password. It's because Git configuration. I probably, if I run my development stack here, I want to push after I work on the CLI from within the container. So it asks you for it, for your password and store it. It's a bit annoying, but at the moment, it's well, it's not important for the workshop, but it's the best way we found for this. So what is the command for assets? It's PHP, easy publish, console, ascetic something. Yes. Let's see if it gets better. It seems that I'm still going through the main controller for the CSS, but it says token storage. Let me just clear all cookies. No. Okay, so yeah, it says use ascetic controller false. Let me see if he loads parameters UAT. Yes. So why should it use the ascetic controller? try removing caches. Then maybe the rewrite rule and the htaccess still is not very good. That might be the second reason. Use debugging equals 0. Oh, okay. I think the problem here is a mismatch between the htaccess and the Symfony configuration. Because if I look at the Symfony configuration, it says, should we use the controller or not? And if I look in parameters UAT, it says we should not use the controller. But if I look at on my htaccess, I just say use debugging 1. So let's try use debugging 0 anyway. Okay, so this is better. Okay, fixed. Okay. So the fix which I had to do, which I didn't put in the text of the exercise, is in the htaccess to change use debugging environment variable, put it to 0. So as you can see, this is where the htaccess file, when you look at it on the host computer, is inside a subdirectory of site easy publish, which we will talk about in follow-up exercises. And I think with this, I finished the exercise, which was exercise 1. My new stack seems to be working. Questions?
Why you use htaccess for environment variable? We can use Docker compose that same file.
Well, we have the Docker stack. We could actually use many ways to store it. I could actually pass them through the chain, you know, from the compose env down into the stack and everything. The fact that they are in the htaccess is because what I want to do is the next exercise to create a separate htaccess, one for dev and one for dev.
And files for dev.
Yes.
Not in the same way.
Yes. You could do it in many ways. We ended up doing it like this because we actually started using for the project from which this one is a copy of with a vhost actually, and then the sysadmins which were running the production platform said, no, we don't do vhost, you can only use htaccess, and then we had to change it, and it ended up here. And I started with a copy of this. But yes, you can put them in many places. There's also another reason, which I can talk later, but I'm not sure if we will actually get to that point. The reason is, if you remember the image of the stack, basically I run both here in one stack. I run on port 80 without varnish, and on port 443 through varnish. And when I go through varnish, I actually don't use dev environment. I use another one called demo. So to make them work together, then it was a bit of, it's just, in the end, it was useful for me to put it there. Okay, so I think we have 15 minutes before the break. So we can probably go forward. Other questions? Does it make sense, or is it just like random set of comments so far? Yeah, it's basically the same. If you look at where we put the configuration, we put the configuration within EasyPublish, because after I will show you a script which symlinks the htaccess into the web directory. But when I started the stack, I had put the vhost configuration here. So it's outside of EasyPublish, but it's still part of the Docker stack. Yes?
I heard that the good practice is not to modify anything inside Docker container with editor, right?
Yes.
We just did it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I just did because,
Okay.
I
So you have to rebuild it, right? It's a container.
if I rebuild it, VI will be gone. Yeah. If I just stop and start, it will stay there. Because whenever you stop it, the image is saved at the state where it is. Yes. I can apt-get remove it just in case. I don't trust myself. Exercise number 2. Managing legacy settings. So we have a few more slides, but there should be just a couple. So managing environments. Just a question, where you work, is it the developer who takes care of the settings, or is it like a separate person who takes care of deployment and he's the only one who takes care about the settings? Depends on the project, both? Okay.
I believe that would be the best scenario, but normally they do.
So in the end, the developers have to take care. That's what DevOps is all about. There's no separation. So how do you manage different settings for different environments? Symfony is super easy. You just create an environment, give it a name, and do these 4 files we did. EasyPublish, you might have done it. If you've done it with EasyPublish, maybe create a separate extension, and then depending on the environment, you load the extension. But it really doesn't feel very good after you've done Symfony anymore. Web server, it just depends, So there's no standard way of doing it. So every time you reinvent the wheel, maybe you create the shell script, maybe the hosting provider say you don't touch anything, it's all my domain, and then you exchange the host file by email or by Slack, whatever it is. Solution, which I propose here, is put all these settings, both for EasyPublish Legacy and for the configuration, at least the configuration which we can act upon, within the source code in the same Git repository, and use a script which deploys them by using symlinks. So the script is already there, and it's in an extension which is already installed. Actually, it's not even a Symfony bundle, it's a package. It's not a Symfony bundle for the good reason that when you deploy settings, Symfony might be broken. So it's a PHP code which tries not to use Symfony. And the nice thing, it has override logic. So it's like EasyPublish 4. You can put some folders in some settings files in a common folder and some in a per environment folder, so you don't have to copy everything everywhere. So let's see how we can use this extension to manage our settings. So first thing is we want to disable debug mode for the admin interface for UAT. Because let's go back here. This is supposed to be the UAT server. It's still debug mode. So if this is for our editors to use, it's not really super nice. So what we want to do is to disable this. Pop quiz, what's a legacy setting for disabling this? Site ini? Debug output enabled. Yeah, we can see it. Setup, any settings. There you go. Debug output, where is the file? In the override folder. So we want to change this, but we want to still keep basically on the same. Now we have two separate stacks, but imagine that you only have one Git repository, so our stack should be able to be running for both development and UAT. So what we want to do is that this file should not be in the override anymore, or at least it should be symlinked, depending on the environment, from two separate places. So if I look at where this file is right now on the file system, it is inside easy publish, legacy settings, common, override, site.ini. That's where it is. So if I want to make this file depend on environment, instead of being inside common, I will create two folders. One is called most likely UAT, and one is most likely called dev. Oops, no, not a file, sorry. Okay, I take it away and move it into dev. I create a copy into UAT. And the one in UAT, I go to the bottom and debug output disabled. Okay, is it clear, this structure on the file system? So legacy settings is the root for where I store all my legacy settings. There's 3 top-level folders. It's common for all environments. UAT and dev for files specific to one environment. And then you have a second level, which can be override or site access and the name of the site access. So this is just like where the target is. Now that I created 2 separate versions of legacy site ini, I should deploy settings again. So basically, I have done this thing by hand. I hope I have done exactly the same thing. And that's the command. So you can see it's been easyp5 installer.php. The command is like a Symfony console command, but it does not go through the Symfony console. Legacy settings install. -- clean means remove any previous symlinks which already exist. I'm in the CLI container. if I look what is in easy publish legacy settings override, I see that site.ini is a symlink, and actually the symlink is broken because the target it was pointing to I moved away. Let me try this command. It says I'm linking a lot of stuff. I'm not 100% sure. I'm gonna check. Here is the result. Is my new site ini points to var dab site is published legacy settings UAT override site ini append.php. So the correct symlink has been deployed for my environment. Let's check it out. Refresh this page. Debug output disabled, and there's no more debug at the bottom of the page. So back to my file system. That's how it looks. No questions? Everybody done this or not?
Use
Similar, yes. There's nothing really magic. We had similar scripts, you know, for when we were doing Easy Publish 4 only a lot of time. The only difference is that now there's this package called EZ5 installer, which does symlink legacy settings. You can use it for deploying htaccess file. It has a couple of nice commands for importing database, clearing caches, and clearing varnish. And basically they are all put together. So it's just a nice set of tools you can use. If you have already scripts which do exactly the same, of course. It's not really new or magic. Okay, so we should have the break in 5 minutes. So we could maybe do a bit early break, or we can go on to the next exercise, which is not very different, which is basically doing the same thing, but instead of deploying separate legacy settings, it's like fixing the htaccess. Because now we have a single htaccess, so we made it work for UAT, but it will not work anymore for development environment. So what we need to do is have 2 copies of htaccess as well, and make sure that we deploy the good one depending on the stack we are on. So let's do it quickly. This is outside of the container. Okay, so now I have dev and UAT inside my easypublish/m files. And then I want to run the script to deploy them. So I go back into the container on the CLI, and I run the command easyp5 installer misc files install easypublish m files. So if I look at where currently my htaccess points to is the one in dev. I run the deployment command. Oops. S. Yes. And if I do ls again, I can see that htaccess now points to UAT environment. And if I look at where I put it, outside of the container, easy publish and files, dev and UAT. The dev one, I should put use debugging 1. So I'm back in the good configuration. And the UAT one has use debugging 0. Just making sure everything still works. Reload. Okay, seems to be working. I don't have easy publish 4 debug. I don't have easy publish 5 debug. And this one still works as well. Okay, so now I know that I can use these simple commands to deploy legacy settings and as well as deploying other stuff. And I keep it all inside easy publish. Why inside the easy publish directory? It was just a random choice. Easy publish legacy call comes fully from Git, so you cannot put anything in there. So the other logical choice for us was to use easy publish. You can see we added a few folders inside here. Default you have config, of course cache and logs, which I hid so they're not parsed. We added M files for storing custom environment files. We added legacy settings for storing legacy settings, and we added data as well. So data is, I think, what we talk about after the break. So far, so good? It's a good question. If you look my slides, todo.txt file is add the slides about cron jobs. But the cron jobs are there, just the slides are missing. Where are the cron jobs? They run inside the CLI container, because that's what I said it's like. I think they run as the site user. There you go. Since we could reasonably change, you want this stack, to work with many environments. The cron job files, the question you asked before is where do they get their Symfony environment? I put in homesite.cron.env, and I think this one is not a volume, it's actually copied into at build time. Yes.
In this case, you have used the bug for on stage, right?
Yes. Yes.
Maybe it will be better if you will create separate images for staging and create development image from staging and just add fix the bug.
So far, when we use this, having X debugging staging was kind of nice because if there's any fatal error when the editor is testing, we have the logs from Xdebug, which are more nice. And we didn't really do a huge amount of performance testing, which is why you want to have Xdebug disabled.
Because if you will start using it in production,
yeah, then we will also need to have a bit more, like we manage the htaccess per environment, of course, then the config things here, they will start to not be perfect because you cannot have a single set of config for everything, yes. I think, yeah, so Xdebug is enabled by default. So this is kind of almost close to production configuration, but good enough for development. We didn't have separate PHP configuration based on the environment. Okay, so next topic, managing database. Again, very old problem. Everybody had in Easy Publish 4 already. There's nothing really magic that I will say about this. Problem is, we have 5 developers. How do they work on the same database? And there's 2 phases of the project. Basically, there's the development phase when you change your content classes every 5 minutes. You create some of those nodes which are important, like structure nodes. And then there's after you go live or after you first deploy to UAT, it's at that moment you don't edit your content classes and important nodes that frequently. On the other hand, you need to deal with 2 or 3 separate databases. So the needs for those 2 periods are slightly different. The solution, well, you can, of course, at least during the first phase, all developers connect to the same database. So it's only one database for everybody, super simple. Second one is a bit more crazy, but we put the database into Git. So while we're developing, generally there are not a lot of assets. There's just these nodes like the top level nodes, and unless they have huge images, maybe we have 40 megs of assets total and 5, 10 megs of database. So why not put it into Git? Scripts to replicate the database to everybody, or just use database replication. I don't know if anybody ever used database replication for this, but I guess it's possible. Do you have any other way of managing this?
Yep, you can use migrations.
Use migrations, yes, which is basically C, scripts. Yes?
Why script?
Hmm?
Remote development.
Remote development. So database is one, but everybody connects to the same server where they actually. Yes, good. Should put it number E. So what are the problems with a shared database? Again, depends on where your team is. If some guys in Ukraine, probably the bandwidth is not good enough. Latency especially is going to kill you. This guy's going to refresh the page and take 3 to 5 seconds. And after you deploy to UAT, you still have the problem, to fix afterwards. What we do now that we have 2. Putting the database into Git is actually kind of works, If you don't change it every 5 seconds, you just have one master copy of the database in Git, and then the developer says, I'm going to change the content classes. I commit. The other guy should not make the changes because merging, a Git merge on our database dump is not fun to fix. But as long as only one developer does it at a time, it works. I committed, please pull and reload the database. Better option, use migrations. So everybody knows what migrations are? It's the name used at least for a Symfony project. I don't know if it comes from somewhere else, where you create scripts where each script changes the database structure. And there's a bundle that has been developed by Calliope for creating exactly the same things. Instead of writing SQL code or PHP code, you can write both SQL and PHP, but you can as well create YAML files where you say, I want to create a node, I want to give a role to a user, I want to add a location here, or I want to change my content classes, which is kind of nicer because you don't have to learn the database structure, and more future-proof as well. So that was very quick. Let's look at what we are requested to do. Exercise 4 is, let's do the stupid way. Let's dump the database from dev. Now, at the moment, it's exactly the same. We already have. But imagine that the developer now did some changes on our dev environment, and now we want to copy over the database to UAT. So it's kind of nice if we have at least a shell script to do the dump, and this is exactly what happens here, is that I put a shell script within the files of the workshop called dumpdb, and a symmetrical one called importdb. Now, why are there shell scripts and not one-liner? If you look at them, it's because they do a little bit more things than just being a MySQL dump. First of all, they call flatten PHP, script from legacy, which removes drafts and all kind of crafts which accumulates in the database. Then it calls one more cleanup script from the Easy Publish 5 installer package, which removes more craft, so that our dump is pretty slim. Another interesting thing is that this shell script does not have the password for the database. Basically, the shell script is going to read your YAML files and find the password to the database. So you're not writing the password to the database in many shell scripts, which is kind of nice. And the third thing it does, it dumps in one script both the database and the storage. So in the end, you have about 100 lines of code, and the import probably is going to be much quicker, but what it does is basically imports at the same time the database and the storage is separated between binary files and binary images. So if we want to give it a try, stop the QA stack, start again the dev stack, go to the dev stack, run the dump, check that new files have been created, copy over the 3 files, and then start the UAT stack and import the files. Okay, let's see if it works. So exit here. Stop the QA stack. Okay, go to deploy, start deploy. Connect easy deploy CLI to site. Give again my username. Okay, what was the command? dumpdb.sh. Again, the dumpdb.sh will use the Symfony environment from my environment. So it's dev, using a password on command line can be insecure. Wow, unable to connect to database server localhost. But it says that the storage has been dumped. So let me see. Easy publish data storage, the time is good because it's and data db. It's also good. So it seems the dump worked even though there's a little bit of errors. So let's assume the dump worked. Exit, stop the container. Since this is in a volume, they will still be on the host machine. Actually, before the dump, I could have done some changes to the database to make sure that it actually works. Let's do it again. Okay. Let me make one change to the content somewhere. Content structure. Ooh. I need to resymlink my legacy settings. Oh yeah, because I changed the location of the site ini. So what was the command again I used for that? Actually, the command I put in composer.json, so I can find it in composer.json. Legacy settings install, this one. Here. Did not work. Why is it not working? Maybe I need to remove the broken symlink by hand. Maybe I did some change on QA and I didn't do the same change here again. No, it seems that in this installation I don't have site.ini anymore. Kind of annoying. This one is on QA still. Wonder how I did to lose it. Okay. No, still doesn't. Okay. So let's change something. Getting started. Got started. Send for publishing. Okay, so we have my one change. Redump the database. Okay. Oh, that's why before it was giving me all the errors. I missed site ini, so that's why I could not. Okay, so that's much better output. Interesting thing in there's One of the lines I didn't show, it also ran a script from another legacy extensions. We actually check the foreign keys within the database. It's an extension called EasyDB Integrity, which has the list of all the foreign keys in the database. And putting it here kind of makes sense, because if you're moving your development database to UAT or to production, you might have some ghost, these kind of objects where the object is there but not the node, or the version is there but not the attribute. So just running this extension, which checks if anything is wrong, is a good idea, so you know how clean your database is. Here it seems that in the images table, I have 21 lines, which probably don't have an image file anymore on disk. Of course, you can run that script whenever you want. It's just part of my zpublish4 installation I use for this workshop. Okay, so the dump has been done. Stop this stack. Copy the files over. One thing to notice is that the dump will use the name of the environment. So when I copy the files, the one which I start with are called dev, and the ones I end up with are called UAT. No, seems like my copy and paste didn't really work very well. One. Two. And the other one is called files. Okay, 3 files copied over, I hope. No, I copied them to the wrong place. So images should be into storage. Images. And files should be into storage files. Okay, deploy QA. Connect dot bin import db.sh, and it says 42 images and 4 binary files, which matches what I had dumped. And if I reload here, I expect to have, now it's the new stack. So this was dev, reload the page. Log in. Now I'm not in development mode anymore, and my database, hello, where are my sub-items?
I think you done ZDB after
Ooh,
changes.
I dumped EasyDB?
You done database after you did changes.
Yeah, I changed only one content. Yeah, so the idea was to see the change to that folder which I renamed, but now it seems that I broke my. Let's try to see it in the front. It was getting started, which was renamed. Got started, okay. So that's the thing I changed, and I dumped, and now it's on the other environment. Okay, so if I want to put this into Git, I can put it into Git. It's probably not the best idea ever, but it kind of works depending on how big your team is and where it is. Next up is actually try to do things a little bit better and do it via migration. So let's see what we can do via migration. Basically, very simple and common task. I want one more attribute in my class. So let's take a random class, article, add an attribute of type image. This time we do it via migrations bundle. So how does the migration bundle work? You have a folder where you put all of your migrations. Then you have a command which will run the migrations. Every time you run a migration, it's stored in the database, so it's not going to be executed many times over. It's quite intelligent. The table for storing the migration information is created transparently for you. And how do you create your first migration? There's a command called generate, which you can use. It will create an empty file with a little bit of comments to help you get started. So it's quite easy. I could, yes?
Does it work on Easy Platform too? I mean, totally on the new stack?
The migration, yes. Yeah, I didn't steal my. The migration bundle is something I will not have time to talk about, but we can talk in front of a shot of tequila this evening. If we go on Travis, you can see, if you wait a little bit, that, not this one. God, this thing is too small. Where do I see, why do I see this thing? Sorry, I need to bring it to a bigger screen and find the good URL. There you go. This is the migration bundle, and it's tested on PHP 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, and PHP 7, and on Easy Publish Community 2014.3.2, all the way to Easy Platform 1.4. So yes, it runs on Easy Platform. Actually, here it's red, but it's a bug in Travis. I am hunting out why, and the interaction between Symfony and Easy Platform configuration files with the at in the YAML, but actually the tests do work. So this, if you want to see how it works, I think it's a very good way when you have open source bundles. Of course, it doesn't make a lot of sense for websites and customer projects to put on Travis and test. But it's a good example of how to test your open source bundles for Easy Publish and make sure they're always up and running fine. Okay, so back to our migration. Still inside QA, which is good. PHP easy publish / console. All the commands are called Calliope migration something. Generate is to generate a sample file. Migrate is to execute them. Migration is to modify a single migration. Status is status, and update is just a synonym for migrate. So let's try with status first. Calliope. Migration status. And it says there's already a migration here. It's basically, because the extension now is at version 2, I use a different table format at version 1. So how to do the update? Well, it updated itself. Funky extension. Let's generate Calliope migration generate, and then you have to pass in the name of the bundle at the moment. In the future, maybe you can just pass the name of the file. At the moment, it will try to look for a bundle where to put your new migration file. Which bundles we have in the system? Well, apart from the core ones, we only have one bundle. Remember, it's not SRC, it's site SRC. It's called WebSC sample bundle. Okay, generated a new migration file, blah, 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 sample bundle, migration versions, so this is the name of the folder, and the name of the file, you see, starts with a timestamp. Now, it's not strictly mandatory, but starting with a timestamp is a good idea, because when you play migration, they are sorted by file name. So if you give a timestamp, you know, migration 2 depends on migration 1, it's good if you get the order. Also, you remember when you created this migration. You probably better rename the placeholder part to something like, you know, modify article class underscore add the image attribute. So just by looking at the file name, you know what is inside. But at the moment, I will not do this. I will just be happy with there you go. Open my migration. You see there's a little bit of tips, auto-generated migration definition, please modify it, of course. And if I go back to my exercise, it's quite nice because it gives me the whole YAML bit I need. Whoppa. Okay, so I think the format is quite easy to understand. Top level is an array. So every migration has a series of steps. Every step is an action. What does the action do? It updates the content type. And then the rest of the keys in the YAML file, well, you're going to find out using the documentation, of course. But some things you can almost guess, you know, with your eyes closed. We modified it's the folder actually, not the article. Anyway, I add an attribute. The identifier is going to be image, type is image, you can have a name, and you can have a description. Now let's imagine I break YAML. You know, not because I'm stupid, it's because things do happen in real life. What happens if I run the status again? Well, the file has been found. It's not been executed, but it's already been parsed. So even before trying the execution, it tells me it's not executed, but you know, there's a fatal error. So it's kind of nice. Okay, let's fix it. Run status again. And description, just an image. I still have an error there. Maybe, yeah, indentation like this is better. Now it's better. It's just not execute. Let's run it. Migrate. Careful. Yes, I promise. Thank you. Done. Yes? Excellent question. So by default, the value you can put when you create content, it supports some data types have handlers. You can register new handlers for custom field types. But by default, everything which is not string or a number, everything which is array, gets from hash. So every field type in established 5 should support from hash with some format. So if you know that format, yes, it works with everything. Okay, it's been done. Let's check if that's real. Let's go to our classes. Folder, yes, modified at 407. And then suspense. Image is there. Easy peasy. Other questions?
Can we also remove an attribute with this?
Yes, absolutely. I can, let me show you the documentation is in this folder, site vendor Calliope, easy migration bundle, doc resources, DSL we call it, and the manage content type. This is content type create, this is content type update. There's remove attributes. So everything in the list of attributes will be added or modified, and remove attributes are the one to be removed. And you can see that beside what is supported at the moment is content, content type, location, roles and policies, tags. This is from the NetGen tags extension. And I think there's one more, because this is probably beta 9 or beta 10. In 2.0 final, you can also create languages. So in case you want to add a language like French, and then you can create French content. And of course, if anybody wants to contribute in the future, I'd support for creating things which are missing, are like sections, object states, and I don't know, maybe something else. Contribution is welcome.
What about reverse migration? If I want.
If you want to downgrade, very good question. If you have used the Symfony migrations, there's always the concept when you write a migration, you should write the up and down so you can go back. In EasyPublish, it's not so easy to go back, because if you add an attribute, it's quite easy. But if you modify something, how do you know what was before? So it's not supported. Long story short, if you want to go back, find yourself what is the good migration that you can write.
Because we use the publish migrations bundle, and we usually write
Both ways, yes. There's another bundle called EasyPublish Migrations Bundle from, what's the name of the other guy? Very cool guy, but it supports only SQL, and then, PHP, sorry. PHP, yes. Yes, and you can use the services. Yes. So with this one, you can do as well both SQL and PHP if you want. So anything more complicated or not supported here, you can write a PHP one. Actually, I can probably find in the tests directory an example. You have more example of valid and invalid things in the test directory. And yeah, that's basically if you want to write a PHP class for your migration, you have, of course, an interface, and the whole interface is this method. You get the container, do whatever you like. It's static just because I don't like using non-static objects if I don't have the method signature. It's just personal style. One more question? Avin? No? Yeah? When you run the migrate command, it will generate a file, but if you try to run it, it's not valid. Yeah. Yes, so you're supposed to edit it.
It's not possible to do it in ZAdmin and just replicate it to the other.
No. The use case is automation. Automation, you never do it in the admin. Yeah. Unless you want to do an interface. Right now, there's no GUI at all. No legacy, no easy platform interface. There's only 4 command line scripts. That's all you can do it with it.
It does only document. It doesn't do binary files.
Yes, you can import binary files and images. If it was creating a content with an image, you would put in the attribute definition the path to the file, and by default it's relative to where the migration is. So I can show you probably in the test. Here you see there's one migration, most likely this one, which at some point imports those things. Here you can see how you can create like a relation. And let me see where I import. Oh, there you go. Here is how I can import an image. The attribute is image is the name actually of the identifier, but you just say path, and then the path to your image relative to the images folder next to the migration. The only one question nobody asked so far, but if you've done a few migrations, it's something you probably know, is this thing, reference. You want to create one object in the migration, then create a second one and link to it. But you don't know the object ID because you just created it in the first migration. Is this supported? Yes. So the way the migration bundle does support this is when you create a content, you can create a reference to the content. It's just like you put it in a variable in memory. It's only valid in memory, so it's only valid. If you run 5 migrations, it stays in memory, but they need to be run at the same time. And then in following migrations, you can use the syntax. So the KMB test21 will be the object ID created here. And then here I can say I create this second object and I link to the one I just created before. So this makes it quite flexible. Okay, so no more questions about migrations. I think that's all that was, check that the folder class has been modified. That's correct. Well, here I should fix its folder. It's not article. That was exercise 5. So it seems we are pretty much on track because we don't have so many more exercises. Deployment script. Okay, maybe a couple of slides about deployment scripts. Is this thing still working? Yes. So who does deployment by hand, deploying things by FTP and editing files on production servers? I know there must be somebody in the room, at least one, honest guy. Yeah, you see, everybody likes pipelines. Even Obama says, do the pipeline, man. Again, I don't think I need to explain why it's a good idea. So everybody probably here has tried at least at some point to write a deployment script for Easy Publish. The problem is everybody keeps doing it again and again, and maybe sometimes you forget some tasks. So for me, this is a good list of tasks to do when you want to deploy. For the simple case. The simple case, you can afford some downtime, and it's not an Easy Publish cluster. The complicated case, you want to do rolling upgrades over an Easy Publish cluster, and I can do a workshop next year if you want. Block access to the website, Git pull, Composer install. Most of the things you do afterwards, you could actually put in Composer and installing scripts inside Composer, or you could put outside of Composer. I don't have a clear opinion on this. You can probably do it both ways. But anyway, you probably want to apply changes to the database. That's the migrations for you. And then it's a lot of caching to run. Opcache is local to the web server. It should be updated automatically whenever you modify PHP files, but I prefer, belt and suspenders, so just clear the whole opcache. Run any custom scripts. if anything has changed in Solr reindex content, and then clear the shared caches. When you have shared caches, you have varnish is one layer of cache, and memcache is another cache you probably use. You just have to remember the good order. The good order is from inside to outside, because if you clear varnish cache first, and you publish local caches afterwards, maybe varnish has already refreshed with stale content. And after this, change the web server configuration again so that people can connect and everybody's happy. Question about this? Anybody has different ideas or anything you think is missing from this? No? Couple of extras, which are totally not mandatory, but it's nice to have. If you run the deployment script, it's a good idea, you know. We are using this kind of Docker stack for deploying UAT and run exactly the same deployment script. So you're testing the deployment script. You're not only testing the rest. And if you use the same deployment script on development environment or testing environment, good idea is run, for example, security checks. Symfony has a tool called from SensioLab Security Checker. It has a list of vulnerabilities for at least 5 or 6 packages. It's not big, but you know, just in case you're deploying outdated shit. More useful if you're using New Relic. Who is using New Relic here? One guy, 2, 3. Okay. So New Relic is the best thing ever, so just tell your customer to pay for it. You can ping New Relic. New Relic will just put a bar in your monitoring thing. You can probably do it with every monitoring tool, you know, so it's kind of good. So if you see that the performance goes like, or better, the other way around, you know when it relates to deployment. So let's break our pipelines. I will not ask anybody to write the deployment script because it's Friday afternoon, so it's already there. It's in the bin directory inside the website, and it's called deploy.sh. Let's take a look at it. It has an option whether it should import the database or not, just in case you're doing this database committed to Git thing. Apart from it, Git pull, composer install no dev, because you need to run separate commands whether you want the development dependencies or not. And the annoying thing is that when you run composer install with the default composer.json from EasyPublish, it will run the assets dump, and it's only been fixed in Easy Platform, but EasyPublish 5, it asks you for the question, what is the environment? And since you only keep one composer.json, you cannot really put the environment inside that one composer.json. So that's super annoying. So what this script does, it modifies on the fly composer.json and then it modifies it back, which is really the worst thing ever, but it works. It runs the importdb script if needed, and then it clears up cache by calling this command, which relies on a parameter which you need to put in your parameters file. Now, that's a kind of a good question to test your PHP level. Why am I sending an HTTP request to clear op cache? Because there's op cache as an API, which is called cleared cache, you know, and I actually put it here in my M files here. Basically, what I'm doing there is I'm calling this file, which is called op cache reset. Why am I not executing this on the command line directly? It needs to run through a server, yes, because op cache uses shared memory. So the shared memory is, first of all, it's in another Docker container at the moment, but even if it wasn't the same, you cannot, from a command line script, you clear the shared memory of the web server. Actually, there's a way to do it, is send a signal to op cache. And it works, depending on your web server, it might work or not. So I just send an HTTP request to one script, which I put outside of EasyPublish. And of course, this thing is protected by htaccess, because I don't want any random Joe from the internet clear my op cache every 5 seconds. It's not really good for my performances. I'm pretty sure there's 25 other ways of doing this. But reindex content. So it does a full reindex. Right now it's only good because we have 80 contents, so it takes less than 1 minute. It calls memcache purge. This also is a script which comes from the p5 installer, which checks your YAML files to find where your memcache is installed. And it does the same for varnish. Here you need to say what is the name of the key where you put the HTTP address of varnish, runs the console security check, and send your ping to New Relic using a curl call. So that's exactly the list of things I said I would do. Okay, it worked. There was a lot of text output. Let's take a look at it. So first thing, it does a git pull, but here, since I did the copy, I probably missed the .git file, so it's not doing a git pull, but anyway, it's kind of okay. It runs Composer, and since now it's UAT environment, it's not dev anymore, it actually removes the dev packages. So it removes all the dev packages which were installed in the dev environment, generates autoload files, clear caches. This calls the EasyPublish cache clear command, install assets, then it calls the legacy assets, and then it calls the legacy settings install. So this is the one we used in the previous exercise. Here it seems like there's a missing new line. So you get an error from that one. Then purging op cache. This most likely also is not exactly what we wanted, so we have to review this one, because we're hitting EasyPublish, we're not hitting the correct page. Okay, reindexing content. This seems to be better. 80 contents. Purging memcache and varnish. Okay, so some configuration still has to be fixed here. Any questions about the deployment script?
What do you do if something goes wrong?
It's a good question. Right now, the deployment script just goes on. If you're like on UAT, you know, you have to, right now you have to go in and fix it by hand. it's kind of hard to make it really be able to roll back perfectly.
Yeah, no, there's a question that I asked this question because like I think the better practice is like when you have a staging environment, you roll everything's there, check if it works, and then you just copy everything without running a lot of things on a production server.
Kind of. It depends how big your database is. Because if you have a huge database, you cannot just create a snapshot of the database every time you deploy. Then even if you
deploy, it doesn't affect database.
Yeah, yes. But often it does. You know, it's like if one deploying 3, there's database involved, then this kind of breaks.
Then you should just better plan your deployment because the thing is that during such deployment, it's too big downtime.
This is also true. It depends, again, how many changes you make. But if you don't have a big database and you can make the copy of the database, then you can do it without downtime. As I said, you can probably create a complete copy. Let's imagine a completely new Docker installation, bring it up, run the deployment there, and just change the main vhost at the end, you know. Using Docker Stack would actually help in this case.
Yeah, you can just
Switch it at the end. It's like, and then rollback is like, blink. If your database is upwards of, you know, 40 gigs and 200 gigs of images, maybe you don't have space, but even if you have space, you know, you have to copy it over, and then you have to tell editors not to change, and if you have user-generated content, you cannot even tell the users not to edit anymore. So having this whole copy frees the database.
But the only things in this case that you need is migrations, right? Well, to run. Basically, you can deploy, downtime, like you copy everything, run migrations, and that's it.
Yes.
Without like all these, things that you have to do in this script, like regenerating kind of some caches or I don't know, not caches, but configuration thing. So and you also like could even deploy the warmed up installation more or less as well in this case.
I have a much more complicated script I did for a customer who is using his published cluster mode, so he has double everything. So what that script does, it takes one copy of everything except the database, separates it from the current website, updates all of it, then runs the database, the script, then switches the current services to production, then upgrades the leftover services, and then puts them back. That's in theory how a real rolling upgrade is done, but it's super, super complicated, and still there are things which are hard to roll back from. Some things are just, please make a snapshot before, and getting back the snapshot is faster than trying to fix it. But if you go like, red-blue deployment is what? George Martin, it's like go to his website and he says, oh, green-blue deployment is the greatest thing ever, except for databases. Small problem, Who has databases in their applications? Like nobody. And who needs no downtime? Sites with small database or sites with huge database, So I think that there's no magic there, sadly.
Did you check Ansible?
We do use a lot Ansible, yes.
You can remember migration if you have rollback. So you can reward your migration if you switching back to old code.
But it will not work with database again. The only problem is database. You can roll back the code very easily, but not the database.
I mean database, we can reward with migrations, we can reward database changes too. Why?
Just imagine easy publish and migration.
In easy publish, you cannot revert the database. You can revert the database only if you don't have foreign keys. If you have foreign keys, database you cannot revert, unless you take snapshots, and that's the only way. As soon as you have referential integrity, you cannot go back. And
in easy publish, like when you publish an object and everything, or like create relations or upload images, it affects so many tables. So, and it's not like because easy publish itself, it doesn't have reversible operations. Like you cannot use any easy publish API call to remove node and revert system back to the stage it was before you created it. It will be a different database.
I mean, when developer writes some migration, he should develop both up and down state. So if he will add some attribute in
Good
up,
luck.
we'll already did this.
It depends. Like if you have to add one attribute and remove one attribute, you can do it.
But usually you shouldn't create content in migration because migration
But if
is
it's
for
some-
structure, not for
but-
content.
Yeah, but again,
But the problem is in easy publish, structure and content have a big wide margin where they mix, you know.
In the class, is it a structure or is it a content?
Structure.
Okay, new folder in the tree that serves as a configuration object for something.
It's depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's... I'm very grateful that Easy Publish at least puts configuration into the file system, you know, because when I'm working with Drupal and configuration in its database, I just want to shoot me every day just for this reason. It makes everything so much more complex. Okay, half an hour to go. Maybe we can even wrap it up a bit earlier. What next? So we have a script to deploy. We created our UAT environment. We changed the configuration of the UAT environment so it's different from dev. We had Easy Publish 4 settings managed by script. We have htaccess managed by script. We manage database. We can deploy. What are we missing? Yeah, testing. I mean, you all test your sites built on Easy Publish, yes? How many people actually do in real life? Has anybody ever done it? I don't mean 100%, but at least a little bit of functional testing for an Easy Publish website. No, nobody ever.
Not for content.
Not for content, not for website. At least for some specific bundle, which is like the generic bundle you made for some. Or APIs, okay. Yeah, the point is, exactly when, well, you don't want to test the CMS anyway, you trust the CMS unless when you find bugs. And the conversational wisdom, and I'm pretty sure those two guys there, like Jakub, will be horrified in my next slide, is that you should write a lot of unit tests, a little bit of functional testing. But when you're working on a CMS, it really doesn't work. You know, it's like you don't have a lot of reusable code, well, depending who you are, but you might have like 10% you put in a generic bundle, or if you're in a hurry, like 0% is reusable. And you have a lot of code which relates to UI. It's all content, you know. So basically, when I do testing Easy Publish websites, I do the opposite pyramid. And the main reason is this, you know, I'm not going to write unit tests for code which relates to a content node which might not be there tomorrow, you know, because just content changes with editor every day. Should I just rewrite all my unit tests? Now, it's true that the interface might also change. You know, next year, new skin, all my SB hat tests are gone. Still, I think it gives kind of more value to the customer if I can test the interface and say, you know, it's not 100% coverage, but can you log in? Can the search page work? Is the button where the people send us money work? Yes?
Why don't you test login screen? It was already tested.
It's not already tested because I did an integration with an LDAP and an MS Active Directory system. Yeah, yes, that's why we did a login test on, actually it was true, not just a smart ass answer. So, you know Behat, everybody? Yes? A little bit, so it's a framework for writing functional tests. Of course, you can use it to write unit tests. as well as you can write unit test, as well as you can write functional tests using PHP unit. So they're not built for that, but you can, of course, use everything to do everything. Behat is very nice. When the first time you see it, it's like, oh my God, how can I've not been using this? You know, you write your test with this language, which reads like a book, you know. Description of the test is when I go to the login page, I fill the form with my username and my password, and I click on the button. I should see a page where the title is Welcome, Mr. Gaetano, and I should see a picture of myself. And you start writing all your tests like this. And it's good, but then you spend a lot of time actually transforming those nice phrases into code. And at the end of the project, you realize that you are the only one who ever read the tests. No project manager ever reads those tests. No customer reads those tests. So Behat is good if you really do, you know, BDD. It's like you start writing the stories and you turn the stories into tests. But in my experience, this is kind of a wishful idea. It never really materialized. From user stories to scenario, there's still a big jump. So the end customer and the project manager will stay on the side of the user stories, and the scenarios will only be the developers. At which point you ask yourself, like, it's very nice even for developers. Maybe if you have a big team of developers, you know, it's common language for them to talk about the test. But if you have a small team, well, maybe you can just use PHP unit as good enough. So that's one controversial bit of information. When you do functional testing, and it will be much more slow than unit testing. You're not mocking stuff, you're going through the interface. The good thing is if it works there, it will work for the customer as well. The bad thing is super slow. So, you know, one test takes 10 seconds. You start writing 200 tests, it takes half an hour, 2 hours. So of course you will not be able to run the test on every commit, on every pull request and make sure the website still works. So this is something you lose. But maybe you can live with it, you know. Maybe you don't need to run the full functional test on every commit. What you need to do is deploy every evening, or at least run the functional test before you deploy to production. So in your pipeline, you run the functional test when you deploy to staging. So I still think there's a lot of value in having a lot of functional tests. The other thing is tests will become slow, and you will still have the customer who finds bugs. Because you run your functional test using Selenium. You know what Selenium is? Yes? And using Chrome. And then the customer has Internet Explorer 9. Or you test Internet Explorer 9 and 11 and 7, but he has 8. Or he has 8 but running on Apple. So it's like Pandora's thing, you know. The more you start doing this kind of test, the more you find there's a corner case which you're not really well tested. And creating a platform where you can test all the browser takes a huge amount of time and resources. There's online services which offer Selenium as a service, and you can test on all the platforms you want. It's called Sauce Labs and Browser Stack, for example. And they also offer manual testing, so you can connect via the interface and have somebody running manual tests as well. So manual testing is pretty cheap, like $20 a month. Automated testing is more like $500 a month, depending on how many concurrent virtual machines you want to run. But I think if your customer really wants to be, you know, have safety insurance that you never ever break the website when you deploy, it's like he has to pay for this, you know. And then you can run your test on every browser under the sun in 1 hour because you run a lot of parallel virtual machines. And still, if it runs in 1 hour, it's good enough. You can deploy every day in the morning or every day in the evening and still run the full test suite. Okay, let's do a little bit of testing. Since nobody here does testing and is published, maybe it's something completely new, but it should not. It's basically using PHP unit. And it's not even writing complete tests, because they already written a test there. What I wanted to do is show, you know, you don't have to be afraid. It's not that hard to put PHP unit testing in your EasyPublish website. So where is the test? I only have one bundle at the moment, and I put the tests directory in the bundle. I created a test to check that my migration actually worked. Do I trust migrations? Not really. So I create a separate test to check that my new field is in the folder class. Actually, here it says article. You know, the more tests you write, the more bugs you will have in your tests. How would you test something like this? Well, this is very simple PHP unit test. You extend the test from Symfony, which gives you access to the container. And when you access the container, then you can get the EasyPublish repository. And then from the repository, you have the API, so you can run all your tests. This repository get content type service, load content type by identifier, get field definition. If the field is not there, I will get null, so I assert that the field type is there. This is most simple thing ever you can do in EasyPublish 5. Just want to show you what is in the functional test case class. In the setup, I call self boot kernel. This comes basically from the instructions from Symfony unit tests. And I just added a method called getOptions where I get the Symfony environment from the environment. Because by default, when you run PHP unit in Symfony, it always runs using test as the environment, like hard-coded. But since now I have all these stacks, one called UAT, one called something else, I want to use the Symfony environment from the environment. And I just saved the repository just because it's a nice thing to put in a variable and not to have in too many lines. So with these 10 lines of code, I can start my first test. I actually put a second test, which is purely functional. So this is testing the interface. How do I test the interface? PHP unit, when you use it on Symfony, there's something, it's a service called like test.client, which will call Symfony, but it will always call it itself internally without sending a real HTTP call. So now I'm running the web container and the CLI container, so the test runs in the CLI container and the web is in another container. So that way of testing itself, which is a bit faster, but it's not really working well anymore. So what I did here, I just got Guzzle. Guzzle is just an HTTP client. Create a new Guzzle client. I have a method getHostName, which is the name of the web container as seen from the CLI container. And that's it. I do an HTTP request. This is an old version of Guzzle. Guzzle API now is completely different, but this is Guzzle 3. And I check that it says HTTP 200. And it uses this thing, the data provider, which is a feature of PHP unit, where you can run the same test over and over with a list of values. And the list of value, basically I use this tag. So this is the name of the method, which returns an array of arrays, and they get injected here. So basically, if I run it now, it's going to be run once with this value. So I'm just checking that the home page works. How do I run my PHP unit tests? Oh, one last thing you need to make sure that PHP unit actually works is have a PHP unit.xml configuration somewhere. And just say, what is the name of the Symfony kernel directory? Because in Symfony it might be called something else, like app, but we call it EasyPublish. So you need this XML file. So basically, with one XML file and 3 PHP files, we have our functional testing. Let's see if it works. I think I put bin PHP unit, and then you say where are your tests to be run? What will happen? It works. Good. Now let's check if I'm really testing anything, because when tests pass on the first time, you should always make them fail at least once. Tests which never failed once is like a fake test, You should never trust this happy test. Like make them both fail. Let's check for a field called image. And let's check for a root which we call blah, blah, blah. One error and one failure. Kind of good. My tests are actually testing something. Okay, so now we can add this to the deployment scripts, based maybe on the environment, and then we're done. Questions about PHP unit and the kernel and easy publish? Okay, so that's basically the next to last exercise. I'm not sure if anybody wants to see the last one. And I don't think I have any more slides for that one. No. So let me just tell you the story. The story is, if you remember when I show you the image of the stack, I said we have varnish and nginx. So I can go to HTTPS instead of HTTP and access the website through nginx and varnish. So within every copy of the stack, I actually can test two Symfony environments. One is using varnish and one is without. Why did I do this? It's just because by default, the developers were not testing with varnish enabled and HTTP caching enabled. So I would have to tell them, this is dev, maybe you have something staging, and then you have a separate stack, you call it staging, and you test on staging. And then you have UAT, and then you have QA, so it's like 99 environments. But especially for the developer, having two stacks and switch over all the time takes a lot of time. It's like 30 seconds or something. So they're, no. And then they start, one stack works, but not the other one. So it's really hard. And of course, developers being lazy, or some of them being a bit junior, they make a lot of bugs which only become apparent when you switch on varnish and you turn into ESI rendering. And some bugs which are more subtle. So even Easy Systems team, which is not junior by any measure, makes these mistakes. Do you see anything wrong with this page? This is easy demo design. There's no code from Calliope whatsoever in this page. Is something missing, most likely? I got 23 errors here. Images are not loaded. Why are they not loaded? Sorry? It's because the links use absolute URLs with HTTP hard-coded instead of HTTPS. And browsers nowadays, they're kind of super secure and they refuse to load mixed content. Why do they do this? Well, it's easy publish. By default, it produces absolute URLs for images in easy publish 5 instead of relative ones. To me, it's a bad idea, but when you ask the guys from Easy Systems, they say it's not us, it's the guy from the Fly System bundle or from Ascetic. And then he says, no, it's not me, it's Symfony. No, it's someone else. So it's not fixed yet. So you need to deploy this, a fix by yourself as soon as you have a website which is full HTTPS, because it will not work. Most of the guys fix it in twig templates, which is the wrong place to put, but it works. It takes 3 characters, so they do it. So the exercise would be find why you got links using HTTP and actually fix it. And there's another error. Maybe you cannot really see it here. You can see it when you use the dev stack, not the UAT one. But if you try in the dev stack to load the home page, this blocks does not render at all. The latest news. Let me show it. I think we can start the dev stack in 5 seconds. So. Oops. Okay, back here. Okay. Oops, an error occurred. Anybody has an idea why this thing is happening? Now I'm running on the dev stack via HTTPS. Firebug or equivalent. Okay, there you go. This is the error. If I increase, no, it just increases the pages, not the link. So the link here goes to HTTPS, so the protocol is right, but it's called _fragment !_path equals something. Do you know what it is? This is when you're using ESI blocks, because we're using Varnish, is the URLs which Varnish should parse and generate to get the ESI blocks from EasyPublish. But this one is being sent by the browser, not by Varnish. Why? Do you have any idea? How do you render ESI blocks in Twigs? Render ESI, yes. Well, there's 2 Twig templates in the Easy Demo design. They don't call render, they don't call render ESI. They call render _h include. They hard code it because they forgot something. So if you try to use render h include through Varnish, it tries to do the JavaScript loading of fragment, and of course Varnish, for safety, has a rule that fragments cannot be requested by the end user. Yeah, so this is the kind of errors which are tricky to test when you're just testing on development environment, and then you find out because they relate to configuration. That's why having HTTPS and Varnish and Nginx and everything in the developer stack is good, because the developer can just add an S in the URL. If it does not work, please fix it. I think 4 more minutes, I've finished here. Perfectly on time, amazing. You can find me on Twitter. This is a company who pays my bills. If you want to have consulting from us, we do consulting on EasyPublish and Symfony. If you want to pay me tequila, I'm open. And thank you very much for staying until so late. Hope it was useful. If you have any questions, I'm here today and tomorrow.